Welcome to the Planning Commission meeting today of July 27th, 2021. Um, and is this where I read the COVID notice?
You may if you'd like.
Okay. Consistent with executive orders from the Department of State of California and Humboldt County Public Health Officer, um, the shelter in place order, the Planning Commission meeting location is not physically open, and planning commissioners are teleconferencing into the meeting via Zoom. Should I read the how to observe and participate section, or is that not necessary?
It's not necessary.
Yeah. Okay. And the join by phone, is that necessary?
No, you can skip right to call to order, and I'll take attendance.
Okay, and do we have anyone attending from the public so that I should note the public comment process?
We do have attendees from the public for various items tonight.
Okay, so since we do have attendees from the public, I will mention that if you wish to comment during the public comment portion of any item, you should click the raise your hand icon on your Zoom screen. And when it's time for public comment, the clerk will unmute you and you will have 3 minutes to comment, subject to the chair's discretion. I think if there are any questions about public commenting, that staff will be able to alert us to that and answer them. And right now I'm seeing a raised hand from Chamber Video on my screen. Is staff seeing that?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, it's gone. Great. So shall we call the meeting to order and ask for the roll call, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Commissioner Barstow?
Here.
Commissioner White?
Here.
Commissioner Vassade-Elcock?
Here.
Commissioner Figueroa?
Here.
And Vice Chair Mayer?
I'm here too. And
for the record, Vice Chair Mayer is running the meeting as Chair Tagney, and Commissioner Davies are absent.
Okay. So the first thing we have is a time for oral communications. This is a time provided for people to address the commission or submit written communications on matters that are not on the agenda. At the conclusion of all oral or written communication, the commission can respond to statements, but any request that requires the commission to take action will be set by the commission for a future agenda, or it will be referred to staff. Do we have any oral communications?
I am seeing none. I believe everyone in attendance is here for an agenda item.
Okay, in which case we will move on to the consent calendar. All matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the commission and are enacted in one motion. There's no separate discussion, and if discussion is required, the item is removed from the consent calendar and considered separately. Tonight we have only one item on the consent calendar, and that is the approval of the minutes of the January 8th meeting. And so if anyone wishes to discuss or make any changes to those minutes, we'll take that off the consent calendar, address the comments or changes, and then vote on that item. Otherwise, we'll vote on the consent calendar, which is only the minutes. Is anyone wishing?
I'll make a motion
address
to
the
approve the
minutes?
consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Vasade Alcock and a second by Commissioner Barstow. All in favor?
Aye.
I'll take a roll call just since
Oh, that's
We're-
right. We are on roll call today. Yes.
Commissioner White, Commissioner Barstow,
Aye.
Commissioner Vasade Alcock,
Yes.
Commissioner Figueroa,
Aye.
and Vice Chair Mayer.
Yes. It appears that the consent calendar, which is the minutes of June 8th, is approved. And now we'll move on to our public hearing for the evening. We have only one public hearing. If any commissioner wishes to provide disclosure of ex parte communications, this is the time to do it. Do we have any ex parte communications? And I'm assuming that means that all commissioners will remain with us for discussion of the proposal to approve a use permit for 8 to 8, a cannabis retailer at 1062 G Street, Suite 3, file number 201-023-UP. And can we have a staff report, please?
Yes, could the PowerPoint presentation be brought up, please? My name is Joe Mateer, Senior Planner with the City of Arcata, the assigned planner for this particular project. It is a use permit to operate a cannabis retail sales business in 1062 G Street, that's Suite 3, an existing building known as the Allen Building, formerly the Golden Harvest restaurant, and then they had various retail sales businesses that were in that operation there. We're still pulling up the PowerPoint presentation. The staff is making a recommendation to approve this use permit. We could have the next slide, please. By adopting the action that you'll find in attachment A. The action includes the findings of approval, including environmental review that is found in attachment A, exhibit 1, and then the conditions of approval are exhibit 2 of that attachment. Attachment B of your staff report includes the kind of application material as well. Next slide, please. This is an overview of the site, more of the downtown area. You have 101 going to kind of on the right side half there. The plaza is in the, we can identify that by the green space there. G Street is an important commercial corridor. It's a one-way street. The Allen Building does have double frontage on that. I wanted to kind of point out some of the existing dispensaries that might be in this area. There is one that is located very close by, about 180 feet. Their properties kind of do share property lines. The Fireplace is in operation on F Street, correct? And then Pacific Paradise is over on G Street, just south of 11th, or I mean H Street, just south of 11th Street as well. And then there is no other dispensary that's shown in this view. We do have the two longtime standing dispensaries located on 6th Street and the Humboldt Patient Resource Center in the heart of Humboldt. They were operating under the purview of the medical marijuana standards for many years. They're actually on the same property, and they've been there for, gosh, I don't know, close to 15 years, I imagine. We do have one other operator that is located on H Street on or on 4th Street, 4th and H, at the old West Plumbing store there, the Humboldt Urban Market there. The other dispensary we have that is operational is located out in the Valley West area. Liberty is out there. The city of Arcata has standards for 15 potential retail sales and service cannabis operations that are located, that can be located with a use permit in these commercial zoning districts. There is a prohibition for them in the downtown plaza area, but we did provide opportunities for our commercial mixed areas such as Sunnybray, Westwood Market, and those areas to also have a small dispensary or dispensary out there if chosen. Could I have the next slide, please? The green area shows portions of the building to the west that are part of the property that is we're discussing. So it does have a double frontage on G Street to the west and then F Street to the east. There is a portion of a parking lot. There's actually 3 different parking lots that are share ingress and egress activities there, but they do try to manage the parking on their spaces on their own. The fireplace is the building just to the south of the green parking lot there. There are a number of tenants in that building, and the fireplace is one dispensary that is in the front part of it. So as you can tell, it's pretty close. But anyway, if I could have I want to point out that the Allen building has 2 stories, and there are some non-cannabis operations, professional business offices on the upper level there. And then the cannabis business is proposing to be on the 1st floor. If I could have the next slide, please. This is the 1st floor of the dispensary area. It's about 6,000 square feet, and it does have different frontages or access areas. One is on the main area off of G Street on the west, and they also have in the upper right corner entrance to that 1st floor from the east, from the parking lot. So some of the area is taken up by the hallways and thoroughfares trying to get in and out. Those areas will be have persons there checking for security and making sure the aged appropriates are there. There are several areas that will have cannabis, and then other areas will have non-cannabis. So a client could go into the store and buy T-shirts or beanies or hats or posters or soaps or whatever non-cannabis merchandise they have, and not really be exposed or access the cannabis retail space area. They will still be age restricted because they do need to enter in and pass through their security at the entrances. And then some of the building is taken up, or the floor space is taken up by storage areas, security, break rooms, offices, and whatnot. The lower portion, kind of the 2/3 and the lower portion of the floor plan, that is the retail sales area. So they'll go through a screening process and make their way around through the retail gallery, the non-cannabis area, and enter into the proposed retail cannabis area and be serviced there. Could I have the next slide, please? These are some of the elevations. I have, it's bounded by 2 buildings on the north and south. So we just show this first one's the east elevation. This is off the parking lot. The applicants aren't proposing any exterior alterations to the building. This particular application did not include any sign permits, so that will be coming as a separate permit later on. They do have the entrance to the 1st floor is on the right side. The other entrance that we see here is to the upstairs business professional office, is one of the access areas. You can get to it there. So they have the 2 doors on the west or the east elevation, one for the cannabis businesses and one for the non-cannabis business, the 2nd story. Next slide, please. This elevation would be off of G Street. If you gone by there recently, there might be some boarded up windows, and they're just doing that for security purposes because some vandalism has occurred. But there are no broken windows there. They're going to pull those off when they become operational. They have the stairs to the left that will take the tenants up to the second floor. The main entrance will be those double wide doors there where they walk into a foyer and have their security screening done. And then the storefront windows on the right, that will be the main area of the cannabis product line. And they do propose to put kind of a film material over the windows to diffuse, to kind of minimize the view of those cannabis sales areas there. Next slide, please. We received some public comment, either by phone or written comment, and I've paraphrased some of these comments. A couple of the comments did come in with a common theme. They're concerned about the number of dispensaries or cannabis retail sales businesses in Arcata, and they, basically said we don't need any more. Don't approve the permit. The other comment came in, and it happens to be a tenant in the building that is concerned about the parking impacts for the tenants. The construction, when they convert, there are some tenant improvements that will be required for the product for them to improve the space, but they're very, very minimal. What I would say, very minimal on-site tenant improvements, and so I don't think it's going to be a very large disruption to it. And I'm sure the applicant might have more awareness on construction activities that they're proposing and stuff like that. So I don't really believe there's going to be much of an impact on the existing tenants within the building. At least it's going to be for a short period of time. Some of the comments were related to the odor. The products that they do sell are all pre-packaged, and so there should really be no odor associated with that. There will be no on-site consumption or cultivation of cannabis plants there to the full flowering stage. I'll follow up further on live plants discussion. There was some concern about the operational concerns, and none of them were really highlighted, so I wasn't sure. Hopefully the public member can expand on the concerns of their operation. And then there was some statements about environmental impacts to on and off-site tenants. One of those impacts was the odor, and I believe some of it was also related to the kind of construction timing of phasing of that. One of the comments was the concentration of the cannabis retail sales businesses in the downtown area. Our staff report that I provided did have a discussion on that, on how the thought was really, when we created the cap of 15, we really wanted to not limit the entrepreneurial ideas that could come for people proposing new businesses. And our public hearing process went through the planning commission and the city council, and I think both David and I flat out said, we're not sure that Arcata can support 15 straight retail dispensaries, but let's have enough where there could be some unique business opportunities that are not just the straight retail cannabis sales. And at this point, that's what we have. We do have 6 operational ones that are throughout in the downtown area, kind of from 4th Street all the way up to 11th Street, and then the one out in Valley West itself. But seeing that we don't have a lot of the other service industry, it's kind of our belief that it could be the barriers to entry. It's expensive to enter into the legalized cannabis market, the level of regulatory review, and there are some barriers to some of those regulations, similar to our anti-smoking for places of employment, or for the public health department on retail sales of food products. So if we had a coffee shop that had a CBD or a THC tincture, that would be considered a contaminant to a food product, and so those would not be approved by the current regulations that the Humboldt County Health Department has. In some jurisdictions, those have been revised, and they do have unique standards to allow cannabis retail consumption other than the combustion and smoking and inhaling type. And there could be a massage therapist or something that does more of a spa treatment with the CBDs or some other relaxing products that they might have. And like I mentioned, we just haven't seen a lot of that. We believe that we haven't really identified any concentration of impacts. The properties have not been blighted. They've been well maintained. We don't see that there's an increase in crime in those areas. And so, you know, the police department didn't identify any concerns as well. So, you know, our concentration is going to occur almost naturally because we require them to be in commercial zoning districts. And so they want a commercial business will want to have that commercial exposure and have that visibility. And so we do see them in our downtown area. So that is not really unexpected for that. The property owner apparently didn't disclose the sale of the property. The application material was signed by the property owner, and they said that it's contingent upon the granting of the use of the permit. So apparently the folks that want to buy it want to make sure that they can operate there. If they are able to operate there, then they'll purchase the building. And then there's some concerns about the hearing process. And I believe I provided those written comments to you via an email this afternoon. They were kind of coming in at different times throughout the day, and I tried to hopefully provided those to you. If not, I can certainly read those to you, or possibly the author of those comments would be able to present their testimony tonight. Next slide, please. The findings of approval are included in the action, and we base our recommendation on being able to make those findings of approval. A lot of it has to do with the application material, the plan of operations, how they manage it, the floor plans, and whatnot. But we do send out referrals to different departments and agencies, and none of those departments and agencies identified any concerns regarding the proposed activity at this site. In the staff report, we believe that we were able to make the findings for approval. And you know, those findings include both compliance with the general plan and the land use code, which is the zoning ordinance, including specific regulations for cannabis retail sales and services. The environmental findings as well. The project is required to meet the California Environmental Quality Act environmental review processes. We propose a categorical exemption, a class 1, section 15301, existing facilities. It was, you know, most recently a retail business. They sold t-shirts, and this is a retail business selling you know, cannabis products and t-shirts and hats and stuff like that. The one thing staff did make a recommendation in was, well, there's a couple. One is currently they do not have any on-site consumption. That's going to stay, or on-site cultivation, and or the sale of live plants. So the application came in with those statements. And through the staff report, I identified that we would encourage the Planning Commission to authorize the sale of live plants because if for the legalization for the private citizen to be able to acquire live plants on the legal market, it is difficult a little bit. You cannot go to a plant nursery. That has to be dispensed through a retail store similar to the project we have before you. Recommended a couple of suggestions: keep them to a certain size, make sure that odor controls are there, and it's not considered cultivation pursuant to some of the cannabis regulations within the state because they're not growing to the flowering level. I know that was one of the comments that a public member was concerned, thought we were contradicting ourselves, but in fact, it's not considered cultivation. And we believe that the built-in odor controls and filtration systems that are already a part of the project would be addressing any of the odors that would emanate from some of the smaller plants there. Another suggestion was to go ahead and increase the hours of operation to what is a standard for the state law. It would be 10 p.m. I think their application originally said 8. And so similar to other dispensaries that we have provided approval for, we are suggesting that we authorize them to occupy and operate until 10 p.m. One of the things that came up through our discussion was, what about the large events at the Arcata Theater Lounge? And in some cases, there might be, a long line that queues out in front of the Arcata Theater Lounge, and they're on the sidewalk, and they might be blocking some of those business doors. And so I thought I'd talk to the applicant, Alonzo, about this, and he suggested, hey, if there's those large events that are potentially going to be causing some sort of concentration there, that they would close the G Street door and use that as an exit only. And so then they'd have new signage saying, hey, look, if you want to join us, come into our business, use the back entrance off of F Street. So that was some of the things that came out of the project there. Could I have the next slide, please? So our recommendation is to approve this use permit by adopting the action as found in attachment A, the findings of approval, which includes the environmental review and also the conditions of approval. The standard conditions seem to apply to many of the cannabis retail sales businesses, so there is nothing unique or unusual about that. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the Planning Commission may have. If not, I look forward to hearing the public testimony.
Okay, thank you very much for the staff report. And right now, I'd like to ask commissioners if there are questions that they'd like to bring up for staff. And it looks like Commissioner Barstow has a hand icon up. So if we can figure out a way, oh, good. And you've unmuted yourself too. Yeah, Commissioner Barstow.
Yeah, just a couple things about the sale of live plants. I don't recall that any of the other applicants we've had asked for that part of a permit to sell live plants. So I'm kind of naive about this whole topic. So my first question is, where does one buy live plants?
Yes, a retailer, cannabis retailer, would have to buy them from a wholesale plant nursery, and then they can sell them to public members through their dispensary.
Is there any place in Arcata that is selling them?
It is possible that they do sell live plants there. I imagine that some of them are selling live plants there.
Hey, Joe, this is Christian Figueroa. HPRC sells live plants. That's for sure. So.
Okay. Commissioner Barstow, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, my other concern about this provision, which I think is perfectly fine, but it may not have been offered to other applicants that we've approved the conditional use permits for, and I'm wondering whether that's entirely fair.
Some of that is kind of based on, I believe, as we figured out the system and the state figured it out as well. And so some of it was maybe not even available at that time, and we were still trying to figure out the process for that. But I think one solution that might work to appease your comment, Commissioner Barstow, is that we could, if the Planning Commission agrees with the parameters that were outlined in the findings in the staff report and the conditions of approval, that we could offer that as an administrative minor modification to their permits if they're interested in it.
Okay, thank you very
Yeah.
much. Commissioner White had a hand up, and then Commissioner Vasade Alcott.
Yeah, before we leave that topic, I do just want to interject that, we would obviously have to take a look at, the authority that we have to do that. The Planning Commission may be amenable to that, but we'll certainly review whether we have that administrative authority. I don't want anybody to walk away from this meeting feeling like if that is approved as a condition, that we would then be able to turn around tomorrow and start issuing that authority to other dispensaries.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that clarification. Commissioner White.
So I don't want to belabor the issue on these starts. I guess my curiosity is that a clone typically would be in a 3 to 4 inch pot, not a 5-gallon bucket. And so I guess I was wanting a little clarification with that. And I don't know if this is possible, but is there a cap on the number of starts that the business could have? Because I've noticed that there's a lot of floor space. And if we're looking at a way to mitigate any kind of odors, it'd be kind of odoriferous if there were, say 1,000 clones. So I was wondering if we could clarify that.
Yeah, some of the plants do come in the clone size, and those are usually really controlled environment where the lighting is maintained, and oftentimes a private cultivator, if they're going to now transfer that out to a natural light, would have more difficulty in having that plant success. And so there are other seed cannabis plants that do it from seed, and they're growing more in a natural light, and that might be the type of product that a outdoor cultivator, private cultivator, would be looking at. So there is a little bit of a variety, and they are right that there are different sizes, but the 5-gallon size was ones that I've recognized in some of the dispensaries, and those were seed plants.
I wanted to let Vice Chair Mayor know that I accidentally removed Julie's hand. So she had a question, I think, still. So I apologize for that.
Hope it didn't hurt.
No, it didn't hurt at all. I just have a couple of questions. I'm just going to say it all, and then Joe, you can answer. So in the findings of approval on packet page 11, it says that they will only allow persons over 21 years to come in, but then in the applicant's project description, they say 18. So that's just a small detail. Said no one under the age of 18 is permitted unless they are a registered patient. So we might want to just change that. And then again, I have problems with the starts too. I'm concerned about the kind of the push in the staff report about the nursery starts, like up to 5-gallon buckets. Is this going to be a nursery, and is a nursery allowed in the CC zoning? Is it a cultivation? I mean, what is it? Is it even allowed? And then on the staff report, again, you're recommending display of nursery plants and starts, but in the applicant's project description on page 26, they say there will be no cannabis visible from the window, and the windows are tinted. So I just see these contradictions.
Yeah, thank you for that. The age one I'll address, and there are provisions for medicinal patients that are under age of 21 to go into dispensaries to get their medicinal plants. So that's the discrepancy between the ages there. And they do have to be accompanied by an adult, responsible adult for that. Did that address your?
I figured that, but that's not actually what it says. But that's really not
Yeah.
all that important.
Yeah, they're going to be, the signs are going to have, will be posted with the age restriction of 18 unless, for medicinal purposes, if you're not, but if you're recreational, then you do have to be 21 for sure.
Okay.
The issue with the starts, no, it's not a nursery. They are not applying for a nursery. Nurseries are not allowed in this zoning district. So that is a very good question. I appreciate you bringing that up. This is just a sale of retail plants. So the plant is ready to purchase. They are not really, they want them out, within 5 days typically, because they don't want to be babying those plants. So they would probably work it out with the licensed dispensary. And when those products come in, I think they come in cycles, is what I've heard. And so I don't know if there's always going to be live plants in there.
So how many plants do you have to have, to be a nursery? I'm like, what's the number? I mean, at some point you do become a nursery if you have enough plants in there.
No, you become a nursery because you're a wholesaler and you have the license through the state and the city that you're a licensed wholesale plant nursery, and you're cultivating them in Arcata would be the CIZ. In Humboldt County, I'm not sure where they cultivate those. They can only sell to retailers or commercial growers. So if you're a private citizen, you cannot go there to purchase. You have to go to a dispensary retailer to buy them.
Could I make a suggestion that we table the discussion on the nursery stock until we hear from the applicant? I'm not sure if there's been a discussion between staff and the applicant about whether or not they're considering doing this, but if they're not, then we may be having a lot of discussion for nothing.
Yeah, well, we've had that discussion, of course. But anyway, I think that was, issue starts, nurseries, and then, we can table it and let the applicant discuss his plans for that.
Okay. Commissioner Besaid-Elcock, do you have any other questions? Okay. I think we are on to Commissioner Figueroa.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, just for the record, I just wanted to mention that, yes, just a quick Google search, HPRC does sell clones. So does Herb and Market, the dispensary on 4th Street. And additionally, too, in supporting Joe's response to essentially to medicinal marijuana users, they are allowed to purchase medicinal cannabis at age 18. And then additionally, the type of clones generally at these sorts of facilities, at dispensaries, essentially, they're usually in Oasis cubes, which are literally 2-inch by 2-inch, or Grodan, like the rock wool starters, essentially, or they're in 4x4 soil containers, essentially. So 4x4x4 generally. And at least from what I've observed and from others that I know that have dispensaries, usually they only have like 3 to 4 racks, essentially, like those metal racks, that are set up essentially. And that's generally what they have in stock. But again, I'm interested to find out, based off of the plan layout for the site, where is it proposed within the actual facility itself? What measures are they going to be using for odor control? What are they going to be using for water? Essentially, how much water will they be using potentially? What sort of practices are they going to be using? Best management practices that use least amount of water as possible, considering we're in a drought. Consider also, but this is a nursery, so they won't be using that much water. But those are just some of the questions I have and statements I have.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other commissioners who'd like to ask questions who haven't asked any yet? I think everybody's asked some. So, Kimberly, Commissioner Wyatt, looks like you have another question.
Yeah, it's not related to the plants being that we're gonna table it. Would this be an appropriate time to ask a question about parking?
It's as good as any.
Okay. My big concern is parking. They talked about having 15 up to 30 customers per hour, and on a daily, that would be 340. And when they're really up and rolling, it could be as much as 400 to 450 customers per day, if I recall. And just today, I went there and, like the water store, you're going to need to park somewhat close because you're going to be carrying these, 5-gallon jugs of water. And, if you want to go to the pharmacy, like today, I had to circle around 3 or 4 times to, find a spot. So that would be a concern of mine. I know that they have security and that they were going to, make sure that the designated spaces for this particular business are the only ones used. um, I guess I'm just wanting to hear a little bit more of like what that would look like, because there is a huge parking issue there right now. If you want to go to the jogging store, same deal. You're going to have difficulty even getting nearby.
Yes,
Okay.
the parking situation does not change. We didn't even look at the parking numbers. This zoning district doesn't require any parking. Theoretically, this property could sell and build a 2-story building where their parking lot is. And so the parking, we do have several dedicated parking spaces, I believe, for the tenants that are there. I believe the different businesses, like you mentioned, Barnes Pharmacy, you have the water, you have the jogging shop, and then you have that used to be a former hair salon in the corner. They have all their own parking spaces there. So are there rogue people parking in where they're not supposed to be? I'm sure that occurs over time. It is in a downtown area where we don't like to consider ourselves having a parking problem. There is, on-street parking. Usually this type of business is going to have a fairly short turnaround. And so there's going to be a lot of vehicles going in and out. As you compare to maybe a restaurant when it was the Golden Harvest, it's probably similar number of people that were at that business, but they're going to be there for much longer time, a half hour, maybe an hour. And so those parking spaces would have been, just used instead of having a higher volume over time. Parking, that is a discussion that we almost have every time. The city of Arcata has taken an approach where parking is not as important as other things. Our businesses, our open space, and buildings and housing are more important than parking. So I don't mean to really not hear you. I definitely hear you, but that's a choice that our zoning regulations and our general plan have made and are making. And so parking isn't, I really don't see parking as an issue. They got a parking lot. They're one of the lucky businesses to have a parking lot. They don't need a parking lot. They could get rid of that if they wanted it. The harsh reality of that is.
Okay, thank you. Before we go on to the public comment period, are there any more questions from commissioners or requests for the applicant to clarify, or any more comments from staff? Okay, in that case, we will open the public comment period on this item. And I think that staff will be coordinating the recognition of public commenters on the Zoom. And there may be some material about how to do that we should explain to them.
Yeah, for folks that are participating on the Zoom call, if you could raise your blue hand by selecting your name and then clicking on the raise hand function. that will recognize you. We will start with the applicant. And I assume per the Planning Commission's typical, they generally give the applicant the first and last opportunity to address any comments that may have been raised. If you're dialing in, I believe you push *6. Let me just double check that. *9. And that will raise your hand, and we'll recognize you then. I'll start with the applicant. Alonzo, you're in the meeting.
Hello. Can
Hey there.
everyone hear me? Okay,
We
good.
can, yeah. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm Alonzo Bradford. I thank you guys for hearing me out. Let me see, where would I start? To clarify on the amount of clones, I would say 100, enough for one tray. The tray would be not visible to anyone. It wouldn't be like right in front of the tinted window or such. They would be over in the corner. I don't know if you all can see the blueprint, but where the retail sales area is closest to the safe is where they would be located. In regards to water, clones don't require that much water. Typically, they're in the Rockwell cubes, 2 inch by 2 inches, are, as stated, the 4x4 containers. And so, if you were to zoom in, right by the door closest to the safe is where they would be located. I feel that's a secure location, far enough and from the actual window over on G Street, and not too visible unless you enter into the shop from the door. The the first door there, you'd be able to view them to the right, but you wouldn't be able to view it any other way. In regards to the 18 plus, that is our 18 minus, it's for medical patients, with 21 plus being recreational. In regards to odor control, air filtration will be used, and starts typically, we're talking again about 100 starts at the most. That's 3 trays. Yeah, that's 3 trays worth. And it would be, there would be a air filter right next to it to prevent any odor. In regards to the parking lot, yes, there will be a security guard whose job it is to make sure that people are properly parking in just the spots allocated to us. It is correct that there probably are some rogue parkers, which would be an issue. However, with the security guard there, he'd be able to tell them that these parking spots are for the Allen building tenants only. In regards to where who else has live plants, HPRC and Urban Market are the ones that also have them. And I have most of I believe that was all the questions that were being asked of me. Just making sure here in my notes. And also in regards to parking, there is 4-hour parking on F Street for the water and shoe store. G Street also has sufficient parking for all front-facing businesses on G Street. And behind where 11th Street is also 2-hour parking, which is more than adequate for the fireplace, the judo house, and anyone who's not allowed to park within the Allen building. There is a sign right in front before you enter the parking lot that states that the parking lot, or these spaces, are for the Allen building, as well as each sign next to it are in the rest of the parking lot. Each one of those businesses, such as the pharmacy, it has dedicated parking with signage, as well as the water store has dedicated parking with signage. In regards to water usage, I honestly believe just this one bucket with maybe a gallon of water should suffice for keeping starts alive. and plants will not get where I'm not growing. It's not cultivation, so they won't get to the stage of teen. I have no plans to sell teens, which is why I'd like to keep the number minimal at 100. That's maximum. That's not just opening up and then instantly putting in 100. That's not the way that I was working on it. I figure I would scale up. So start out with 20 plants, and then if those sell and do well, go up to say 40 or 50, and then scale up from there, because I do worry. I don't want them to sit for too long and to actually grow any larger than a start. I believe that answers most of the questions. Please let me know if there's any other questions. I have tried within all my power to remain as compliant and as out of the way as possible with my dispensary. I don't want to cause any uproar. I don't want to be a burden or a problem. And in regards to construction, nothing more than hammering, maybe a buzzsaw for wood purposes, but everything in there is sufficient enough to where I'm just buying counters and putting in counters for the retail, a basic build out, clothing racks, tables, display cabinets. I believe the most noise should honestly come from maybe the drills when putting in doors and mag locks. And that's all. Should I put my hand down, or is there anything else that I can help with?
I think if you had anything else for the Planning Commission, they'd be happy to hear it. But otherwise, they'll also provide you an opportunity at the end if you have any closing thoughts.
Thank you very much.
All right,
I'm going to mute myself.
Okay. All right. So we have call-in user 2 who's coming up next. Go ahead, call-in user 2.
It looks like the
Um,
call-in user has their mute on. Is there any way to suggest that they unmute somehow?
Yeah, I've asked them to unmute. I'm not sure if they are having difficulty unmuting.
Okay, it looks like they're unmuted now.
Oh, I think they just jumped off the call. Okay, well, they'll have an opportunity if they come back. This is an opportunity for public comment. If you're on the Zoom web platform, you can click on your name on the ellipses next to your name and raise your hand, do the raise hand function. If you're in a call-in user, you can do *9, and that will indicate that you wish to be brought into the meeting to speak. At this time, I'm not seeing any additional attendees who wish to speak.
Okay. If there are no more members of the public who wish to speak, we can invite the applicant to say a few more words if he'd like to. Otherwise, we will then proceed to the commission deliberations. Does the applicant wish to say anything more?
I have one more that has just.
Oh,
I'll bring that speaker in.
okay. Let's get that person on the. I guess you can't say on the air on the whatever we're on here.
Yes. Go ahead, Jay.
Hi, I've submitted several public comments over the last 2 days. I'd like to understand how they're going to be incorporated into the process, since I'm not saying all of what I said in my submissions today, right now, tonight. How does the Planning Commission receive the public comments, and how are they incorporated into the decision-making process?
So all of the public comment that we receive prior to the meeting is either included in the staff report if it's submitted in time, or we email those correspondences to the planning commissioners before the meeting. And then that correspondence will be incorporated into the public record on the decision-making process and uploaded to our web platform after the fact. Certainly correspondence that was received, by the commission just prior to the meeting, they probably have not had time to digest. So you may wish to make your comments, assuming that they haven't read anything at this point.
Okay, so I want to observe that I agree with the person who spoke earlier about the number of contradictions in the permit proposal itself. And in my public comment, I observed that there's some measurement errors, and especially in terms of the quote, section F 500-foot requirement. The current, what I consider as a renter in the Allen building for 20 years to be already an on-site dispensary, the fireplace is listed as being approximately 180 feet away from the opening to the proposed Allen building dispensary. And yet the Jiu-Jitsu studio, which is actually closer to the Allen building than the fireplace dispensary, is claimed to be 800 feet away from the proposed dispensary. And that is just downright wrong. So does anyone go through the permit information and actually verify the accuracy of these data?
Just a note on the process, the opportunity to speak at this point is to provide public comment. And then if the commission wants staff to address questions that are raised, they'll ask us to do so after you've spoken.
So sorry, thank you so much. So
yeah,
I'd like to let the commission know that having been a renter in that building for 20 years, that data are wrong, just patently wrong. This would be the 7th permitted dispensary in the immediate downtown area. And yet the verbiage included in this permit process says that that these dispensaries are designed to be included in Sunnybray or Westwood. And yet neither Sunnybray or Westwood currently have a public dispensary, whereas the downtown Arcata area will have 7 if this one is permitted. Number 2, that there's supposed to be 500 feet between 2 dispensaries is clearly being violated, with the fireplace being within 200 feet of the proposed dispensary in the Allen building. As a long-term renter in the upstairs offices, I was appalled that those upstairs office spaces were completely ignored in the permitting process petition for application. I'm sorry, I'm mixing up the proper titles. To have this permit have no EIR required when the upstairs offices are going to be completely impacted by both the required instruction, which if you go deeper into the application is actually substantial. There's electric circuitry that needs to be upgraded. There's actual physical construction, much more than a few hammers pounding. This remodeling from a restaurant, the Golden Harvest, to a dispensary is going to be substantial. And no one has addressed how that's going to impact the upstairs offices. Number 2, we all know that the operator of the dispensary sounds like a nice person, has good intention, but controlling the pungent odor of cannabis is quite challenging. And if you walk by the outdoors of even the fireplace, you can tell that there's cannabis inside there. So I too am concerned for the cultivation factor. Now, cultivation is an interesting word, and I looked it up on dictionary.com. It means growing things. So yeah, you might have starts in there and you're not cultivating from a seed and they're not coming to flower, but by keeping plants alive, technically that's the definition of cultivation. So that the permit says there's no cultivation and cultivation is intended kind of makes me a little suspicious about the whole 9 yards being presented here. And that's where I'll end my comment. As a 20-year renter in the upstairs of the Allen building, I was only informed by the city of Arcata, not the landlord, that this sale was intended. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no other public comments apart from the applicant.
If the applicant would like to say a few words, you have an opportunity before we close the public comment period. You can decide not to, but it looks like you're up on the screen. So
Hello again. Yes. I'd like to say thank you all again for considering me. In regards to the vicinity, honestly, HPRC and the heart of Humboldt are just right next door, and it's been that way for years, and there doesn't seem to have been an issue. In regards to construction, regardless of who is taking over that place, construction is going to happen. It's necessary to happen. And if electrical and plumbing, that's not very loud. I actually own a dispensary already in Humboldt County jurisdiction, of which I'm completely compliant. I've been open there for 3 years. This is my second dispensary. I'm just living the entrepreneurial dream at the moment, which again, I appreciate you all for allowing it. And in regards to cultivation, the BCC regards cultivation as growing all the way into flowering. This is just start. I'm merely keeping them alive long enough to be sold, and I've already stated that I have no plan on letting them go into teenage stage. I plan on just selling starts. That is all. Thank you guys again. And I guess in regards to the downtown concentration, from a business standpoint, I believe that most people enjoy going downtown because of the amount of traffic that is downtown. You have the farmers market, you have the Arcata Theater. It's a lively and bustling area for Arcata. So why wouldn't we select that area? That's all. Thank you guys.
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think if we have no more public comments coming in, we'll close the public comment period and move on to commission deliberations. Maybe the best way to do this would be to go around and hear from each member of the commission who would like to speak. And I can either just go in order or we can have our hands up icons again.
Going in order sounds good.
Okay, in that case, I'm going to go not in alphabetical order, but in the order of how you appear arbitrarily on my Zoom screen. And if you would like to speak after I call on you, please feel free to say that you'd like to speak later. But next to me on my Zoom screen is Commissioner John Barstow.
I have no comments beyond. I think it's a good application. I would vote to approve it. Also, I'm okay with including the staff suggestions about the extending the hours from to 10 to 10, and also the provision for live plants.
Okay, thank you. Next, Commissioner Kimberly White.
So I guess with regards to odor mitigation, my understanding is that the city can and will go in and monitor. So I feel like that should hopefully eliminate any issues is, if it does come up, certainly the city can go in there and they can have a discussion and, add any additional filtering or whatever needs to be done. So I'm comfortable with that. And I do appreciate that the applicant did address the parking issues. It sounds like they really are going to be sure to ensure that the surrounding businesses are not impacted and that they're going to, their security will take care of that. So I just wanted to, thank him for addressing that. And I think that was all I had. I didn't want to beat a dead horse with regards to, the number of starts. It sounds like he really is going to be minimal. There's going to be 3 trays. They're going to be small. And as pointed out by Christian, HPRC and one of the other businesses are doing, similar. So, and I haven't heard any problems with regards to, those businesses operating and doing the same. So I think it's a good plan, and I look forward to seeing them.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, Commissioner Vasaid Alcock. Julie, do you have anything you would like to say?
Just a couple of things. The public speaker, that was great that she called, and I'm sorry that she's upset, but she was wrong on a couple of things when she said about the different dispensaries being so close to each other. That's a special consideration. It's not like they can't be, they can. It's just a special consideration. She can look that up on our land use code. I don't like that the staff is telling them what hours they should have. I think let's just leave them, they can do the business. Let them figure out whatever hours needs to work for them. Parking is going to be an issue. Parking is an issue in Arcata. It's faster on your lunch hour to go to Eureka to do shopping than it is to be in Eureka. So that's an issue, but it'll work itself out. Arcata is still the best place. And otherwise, I really like this plan. I feel like they're going to be really successful. And I feel like I really liked what they wrote in their project description. It sounded like they really looked around and tried to cater to everybody. I think I'm excited about this. I think it's going to be really good.
Okay, thank you. And our next commissioner, Christian Figueroa, if you'd like to comment.
Yeah, sure. I feel that the applicant answered the questions that I had, and I feel also answered the questions of the rest of the commissioners. Just like the other commissioners said, parking's always an issue in downtown Arcata. This project isn't going to solve the parking issue in downtown Arcata. So we shouldn't, have this individual shoulder that issue. So I'm ready to vote on this. I'm ready to vote to approve it. So that's all my comment.
Okay, thank you. And I guess I'm the last commissioner to comment. I appreciate that the major questions that our commission and members of the public have asked have actually been addressed in some way. Just as a matter of precedence, I do think that the extended opening possible times by 1 hour suggested by staff and the addition of live plant sales also suggested by staff. I'm not sure that's a great precedent for staff to be suggesting more lenient conditions than those asked for by an applicant, but I also see the value of consistency among the many permits in the city, and so I'm satisfied that that's an appropriate way to go, and that staff actually discussed these things with the applicant after the official application came through and before the staff report that we got recommended the possibility of starts and the possibility of extended hours. I don't see any more parking issue from this business than from any other business, and probably less of an issue than from the restaurant that was there before. And of course, the concentration of cannabis businesses in our downtown is the concentration of business in the downtown, which is exactly what a business district tends to have. So I would be ready to support approval of this project. I'd also like to point out that in terms of public noticing, the way the city's public noticing goes on this type of project is usually to property owners and not necessarily to rental tenants. And so the issues between the tenants of the building, the current owners, future owners, and other future tenants, that really is a private matter. And I would hope that current as well as potential future owners would make an effort to maintain good relationships with all of their tenants by informing them and discussing with them possible changes in the conditions of their tenancy. So I do appreciate the comments from the public about those issues, and appreciate the comments from other commissioners about the land use code. So I think at this point, is there anything else that members of the commission would like to add to our deliberations? Anybody?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve land use permit for 828, a cannabis retailer at 1062 G Street, Suite 3, file number 201-023-UP.
Okay, and do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right. I believe that the motion addresses all of the issues that we would need to address in a vote, but are you clear that that includes the findings, the conditions, and the CEQA exemption in that motion?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I believe it's covered. Joe.
Good.
There.
Okay, in that case, can I ask staff to take a roll call?
Yeah, absolutely. And I did want to just note what's more of an administrative matter. I don't think it needs to be addressed in a motion, but in our action, we actually have that under the California Environmental Quality Act exemption is proposed. And in the adopted action, we'd be changing that to is adopted.
Okay.
So there may be little grammar cleanups. Okay, so Commissioner White.
Aye.
Commissioner Figueroa.
Aye.
Commissioner Barstow.
Aye.
Commissioner Vacedo-Elcock.
Aye.
And Vice Chair Mayer.
Yes, I vote to approve. Okay, in that case, it looks as though our commission is unanimous for approval. And congratulations to the applicant on that. Best wishes for your next steps. And now we move on our agenda, I believe, to one business item. And I think we have a staff report on that, I would imagine. This would be, I'm going through my agenda, to discuss a preliminary review of conceptual development for North Star Development LLC at a location 945 6th Street in Arcata, That would be assessor's parcel 021-166-010 at the corner of J Street and 6th. Do we have a presentation?
Yes, this item is a business item for the Planning Commission as a preliminary review as requested by the applicant and agent. They submitted some conceptual plans, a site plan, and an elevation. They are looking at redeveloping the site. It's in the coastal zone, and currently it's a vacant property. I did provide in the staff report, the packet, the conceptual plan, elevations, the site plan, and also kind of a checklist of kind of project information there that regarding the codes and stuff like that. But I was really hoping to, have a dialogue between the commission and the applicant to, kind of get a feel of what their questions were, what they're hoping to get some responses on. I know that as staff is processing the project, we came across the dilemma of the two code approach. We have the coastal land use and development guide, and also the inland or citywide land use code. And in some cases, they have not only conflicting, but different code standards. And the one in particular with the residential zoning districts in the coastal zone is they have a height standard that is tied to the setback, and it's a 2-to-1 height to setback ratio. And so for every foot in building height, for every foot in setback, you get 2 feet in building height. And so if your building is not square to the property line, or it has bay windows and a lot of bump outs and things like that, multiple stories, dormers, those get pretty interesting when you start creating, that 2-to-1 height to setback ratio. When the city adopted the land use code, in their wisdom, they said, we really don't need this anymore. We have the standard setbacks, we have the floor area ratio. Some people, I've discussed this item for years, and they felt that it provided benefits of different architectural style because it does require sometimes to break up the building facade a little bit. It maybe provides more air and light for some of the reasons for that. Typically, we would allow a reduced setback option agreement with the neighboring property if the setback or the height of that 2-to-1 ratio was deviated. And so it became kind of an agreement between the two private property owners. And we did away with that, again, based on the land use code, and the consultants were saying, that's probably not a good idea to have a land use decisions that are put into private agreements like that. And I know John Barstow was on the Historic Design Review Commission for many years, and often would see these reduced setback option agreements. In this case, it is my understanding that the applicant is not proposing any reduced setback option agreements or deviations of the 2-to-1 height setback ratio for the common property lines with adjacent residential, and I believe one is a commercial property. So those interior property lines are going to meet the 2-to-1 height setback ratio. They do request that they get a variance for the city street, because typically our code would not typically allow a 2-to-1 height setback ratio on public streets. But we thought that, this planning commission might realize that, across the street, if it's in the inland portion of the city, an applicant property owner would not have to meet that development standard. And if we take a look at as a deviation of our development standards, like we do with our minor use permits, with setbacks or building height, through that design review process, that we might be able to go ahead and consider a 2-to-1 height setback deviation for those streets. And so that is certainly one area that I would be interested in finding out is, are we kind of thinking it would be okay depending on what the project looks like or something like that. But other than that, I think, I'm not sure if David had any comments or if our applicants are willing to present some of their vision on the project. There was one dwelling unit on the property. It was destroyed by fire. And now we're looking at, up to 8 dwelling units on that property. And so even the density is a little different. We have our base density, and then the state law created opportunities for additional development through the accessory dwelling unit. And some of those are interesting. And one of the ones that they have is that you can create an accessory dwelling unit on an existing structure that has non-livable space. And so if there's a game room, a sewing room, library, laundry room, boiler room, that you can convert that to an additional dwelling unit. And so when we saw that state law, we just thought, we kind of realized it's like, wow, what people are going to do is build a structure, and then they're going to build this phantom room. That's not a dwelling unit. It is a game room. And then when they get the building permit finalized, they're going to turn around and come in and say, I'm going to convert this to a dwelling unit for state law. And so we thought, well, really, that doesn't make sense, because you got some issues with economies of scale and the manufacturing and the construction. It kind of, why don't we just kind of allow it outright and say that they're already going to get that bonus? But that does kind of throw into some of the other development standards that we look at when we review projects. For instance, the floor area ratio or site coverage. Those things might be manipulated a little bit by that provision. So anyway, that was one of the things that I think this project is looking at doing, is trying to get an additional dwelling unit through that conversion of undeveloped space. But anyway, does the commission have any?
Yeah, if I could.
Yeah, David, go ahead.
Well, I'd like to add to that real quick, Joe, if I could. Yeah, the commission doesn't mind.
Yeah. Before you do that, I'm just wondering: is the applicant on our Zoom tonight? Will they be able to answer some questions?
But they are. Yeah, absolutely, and they can present the project. I just wanted to give sort of a slightly higher level intro, just real quick, to why we're here tonight, and to give the commission a little bit of insight and taste for the precedent that we've set before, why we're doing this. So you have some understanding about what the real decision matter is before you. As Joe mentioned, the way that we brought this forward, this is a preliminary review, if you will. And so technically speaking, it's not part of the approval process. This hearing hasn't, or this meeting hasn't been noticed. You're not technically held or bound to the statements that you make in this meeting. And so it does present sort of an awkward situation where maybe you'll tell the applicant, hey, head forward, go for it. And then they come back later after having gone for it, and then you've changed your mind. So we just want to acknowledge and recognize you're not bound to what you say tonight, but the applicant really is seeking some direction. So keep that in mind. To dig into the nuance a little bit about what Joe mentioned about the two codes, recall back to the Rebecos Montessori project, where we'd adopted some standards, some uses, some types of activities that we wanted to see in our community into our really recent updates to our land use code. And if you look at the land use code, it was principally permitted. And if you looked into the coastal zoning, it was a stretch to make it work. And so we got a little creative to ensure that the community got what it needed out of the decision-making process. We threaded the needle between interpretations to ensure that the Planning Commission can make a legal decision, one that was supported by findings, but that balanced the community's desire to have these kinds of uses. We're proposing to do a similar thing here, as Joe really excellently explained. We used to have a 2-to-1 height to setback ratio that's implemented still in the local coastal plan. We abandoned that. And so we're coming at this with a creative solution. We don't issue many variances in the city of Arcata. And, we think that from the standpoint of, appropriate planning, you don't want to issue a bunch of variances. You want most projects to fall neatly into the codes that you've adopted. But as Joe connected the variance with the minor use permit, I think that's a really good analogy. Right now in the land use code, if you need to vary from the strict standards as they apply to a site, and you need a 4-foot setback instead of a 5-foot setback, or you need to go to 26 feet instead of 25 feet, you can get a minor use permit. We issue those all the time, minor use permit for a slight variation in the strict application of design standards. And so if this were in the inland and we needed to modify that site standard, we would be issuing a minor use permit. We wouldn't even be having a conversation about it. We wouldn't even be asking you. We would bring it forward and say they're asking for this minor use permit design exception. In the coastal zoning, we don't have a minor use permit process. What we used to do back in the day was we would issue variances for this very same thing. And if you look through our files or historic files, we have tens of variances for this exact type. And so what Joe is proposing that we do is issue a variance under the coastal zoning to allow for what we would traditionally allow for through a minor use permit in our local zoning. So I think Joe's correct. We want to get feedback on that approach. With regard to the design that you see before you, I just want to be real clear. This parcel is 0.3 acres. The maximum density is 15 units per acre. And so that gets to 4.5. We round that up. That's 5 units. This parcel under the zoning would allow for 5 units. It's not just a tale of 2 codes, our land use code and the coastal zoning code. It's actually a tale of 3 codes because, as Joe mentioned, there's this state law overlay, which just kind of overly complicates everything with respect to this site because we've got to try and balance all these different codes. If they were to come in, as Joe said, and build out an apartment building that had 5 units if they're allowed per the density, and then leave a shell inside that apartment building that was unlivable space, they would be able to come in by right. We wouldn't get any choice in the matter. They'd be able to come in by right and say, we're turning this into an ADU. And we would say, okay, thumbs up, go get a building permit. The very next day, they'd be able to come in and by right, without any kind of review for design or any other standard, and get 2 more accessory dwelling units detached from that building. And so using state accessory dwelling unit law, they could arrive at 8 units on this property. It seems to me, given the concern that the city has put into design, that we would rather see the plan in advance. And so that was kind of the strategy that we're proposing here, is that they come in with a total of 8 units that they would be allowed by right to arrive at. And we look at it as an integrated single development that allows us to arrive at a more comprehensive, thoughtful development that the Planning Commission will be able to review in total. And so this is technically 3 more units than is allowed by the density. All 3 of those additional units are accessory dwelling units, and we've made sure that they meet the standards of accessory dwelling units for the project. And so that's the other main issue we want you to weigh in on. Is the commission comfortable moving forward with that planned design, or do you want to see them come in and hodgepodge together a design that wouldn't necessarily result in the same kind of more thoughtful development? So those are the 2 main issues, and I want to let the applicant provide the commission with a presentation on their project. We don't want to necessarily reflect the project. I just wanted you to be aware of those 2 main issues going into your thinking on this. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the commission and if they have any questions about the direction that we're proposing we go.
I'm wondering if we can hear from the applicant before we go into the commission questions, because chances are the applicant may actually have something in the presentation that will tell us what we need to know.
Sure. I brought in Sarah Atkins and Kyle Boughton, the agent and applicant, respectively. Is there anyone else that I should bring in from your design team?
No, that's all. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Well, good evening, everybody. I appreciate everyone's time this evening, and David and Joe, I also appreciate your intro and presentation there. I covered a lot of the great topics that we're looking to do with this project, and I appreciate that. I'll let Sarah, my drafter, kind of touch on a lot of the specifics as far as numbers and things we're looking to do. But I'll kind of give you a brief introduction of what we're trying to aim for with this project. As David mentioned, we are allowed 5 units per the use code, and 3 of those units will be ADUs. And really our goal here is to create a project that is going to fit and look like a good development for the downtown area. We definitely don't want to come in here with 5 units and create unlivable space and then later convert that into ADUs. It's very difficult from a development standpoint to make everything flow well and bring in good elevations and design standards with that route. So the big thing we're looking to do here is deviate from the 2-to-1 setback on the street sides. And a lot of the constraints that we're having issues with is parking and driveway entrances and things like that. So we went through multiple design standards with our site plan to see what fits best. And this is kind of the site plan that we had came up with that meets all the requirements and not requiring any 2-to-1 setback on the interior lot lines with the neighboring parcels. And from that point, I think I'll turn it over to Sarah. Again, as we all know, there's really a big push for housing in Arcata. And what we're really trying to do here is create a nice project that fits well with the community, and also being able to provide more housing for our community as well. So thank you for your time, and I'll hand it over to Sarah. I'm sure she'll have more specifics on a lot of the details. Thank you.
Sarah, are you able to unmute?
David,
she may have called.
Do you have to unmute her?
No. Sarah, are you on the 406 number?
Nope. Can you guys hear me now?
All right, you made it. Perfect.
Perfect. Yeah, so basically just a quick recap. We kind of went through a similar site plan rendition. We worked closely back and forth with the city to what we thought would kind of suffice an original design, which had 5 units up front and 3 in the back. And we went through a full application with the site plan, the floor plans, elevations, which is pretty time consuming. And then we sent it out and we got a couple of referrals back that kind of changed the whole drive. We couldn't use that original design. It's similar, but it's different. That those two being the 2-to-1 setback, and then the driveways. We originally had different driveways for each of the front units. We had 4 driveways, and engineering wanted to minimize those to 1 or 2. So we kind of went back to the drawing board. Something similar, to that original style, which are the conceptual elevations that you have. So those are not correspondent to the exact site plan that you have in front of you. That's from the original design, which had the 5 units. But we do want to do something similar in appearance with this one. But we were able to relocate the driveway, the access to the garages by doing one common driveway in the back. But with that being said, that caused us to have to push all of the units forward toward the street frontage, and that's where we lose the 2-to-1 on the street frontage. We thought it was more important to keep 2-to-1 on the interior lot lines with neighboring residential parcels than it was along the street. And like staff pointed out, across the street, that 2-to-1 doesn't apply. So it's kind of a nuance that we're fighting. So we're really just looking for feedback to make sure that the commission, this is something that the commission wants to support or can support, as well as staff and referrals before we dive back into all the details of the floor plans and elevations. With this one, it's just a little different. We have 4 units up front, 4 in the back, which is a little different than the original plan, which had 5 and 3. So I don't know if that's an issue as well, having the 4 and 4. It's a little bit different split, but it's really just a paper game of what we're calling it, whether it be a primary or ADU. So I think that's the bulk of it. If there's any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not sure how we should go about this. David, Director Loya, do you want to facilitate the back and forth with the applicants, or shall I do that?
Yeah, either way. I mean, I think if the Planning Commission has questions or insights about the design or the process that we're proposing, the design, I think the applicant can handle. Process, I think, staff will handle.
Okay.
I think certainly to Sarah's point, she didn't want to go through a series of design iterations and then find out at the end of the day that, hey, look, Planning Commission just doesn't have the appetite to, try and approach the project this way. So that's one of the main questions.
Okay, great. I have a feeling that commissioners will have plenty of questions, and I'm happy to call on people if you can unmute yourselves when I do that. Does anyone want to start with questions among our commissioners? It looks like Commissioner Barstow has a question or a series of them.
Yeah, some comments mainly. I think it's kind of a slam dunk in terms of the setbacks. I don't think, I think what they're proposing is fine, and whatever we need to do to make that happen, we should do. I like the basic conceptual design. Has a lot of good articulation that breaks up what could be just a big flat wall. So that's to the good. I'm glad Sarah pointed out that this was an earlier iteration, and because it says north elevation, and in many ways it doesn't match the site plan. Mm-hmm. So I presume that'll come later. But I just wanted to encourage the continuation of the conceptual ideas and point out that the important facades are the 6th Street and the J Street facades, particularly the 6th Street. But at the same time, I would recommend that the designer provide for as much passive solar gain as possible, which would mean lots of south windows, not so many north windows. Mm-hmm. Other than that, another recommendation is to try to make the courtyard area, which really functions more as a driveway, try to make it so it's attractive, so that people will be looking out their windows, particularly in the back units. Will be looking out their windows at the courtyard, and if they're just looking at, say, a solid concrete driveway, it will not be pleasant. So it's something to keep in mind in the design phase. The other thing I was going to say is that in the design, they could possibly extend the second floor over the garages and gain more more floor space in the units, as well as giving some articulation to the garages. In other words, the garages would be appear to be kind of set back. So those are my thoughts. I think this really is an excellent use of that property, and it doesn't feel like the units are squeezed in. It feels like well, just looking at the conceptual drawings and the site plan, it seems like a perfectly good alignment and arrangement of the units. So that's it for me.
Thanks, John.
Okay, who else would like to speak now? And actually, the applicant or agents, Sarah or Kyle, if you have anything that you'd like to respond to Commissioner Barstow's comments about, this might be a good time to do it as well.
Just real quickly on both of the points, I think we're right on cue for the courtyard, because it does have to function as the driveway. Our plan was to do a majority, most of that as pervious pavers of some sort, so it's not just a concrete driveway, so it'll kind of look more like a courtyard instead of a driveway. And then we will cantilever the second and third floors. These are intended to be 3 stories in height. With the garage on the first floor and then living space on the second and third story. And we will use cantilevers on the second and third floor, front and back, to, one, gain the living space, as John pointed out, but then also to kind of break up our facade as well.
Okay, great. Who is next among the planning commissioners? Anybody have any questions, comments?
I have a comment, Judith.
Great.
Okay. Hi, Sarah. So I think this is a really great use of that lot, and it's really hard to believe all of this will fit on that lot. So I'm excited about that. Just two things. One is the courtyard. There might be an echo in there. Have you taken any measures to make sure there's no echo in there? Because that can really cause conflict between the neighbors if everyone's in there. And anyway, especially if you're having pavers. At first, I thought it was going to be a lawn. So that's one thing. And then another thing is, I feel like I agree with everything that John had to say, but I feel like this is the same facade that the last few buildings that we've put up. It looks like the same thing to me. It would be nice to have something a little bit different. But my big concern is the echo, because that can really cause conflict between those neighbors.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions, or actually would the applicants be interested in commenting on any of the things that we just heard?
I don't have anything off the top. I guess we didn't really consider that noise, so that's something for us to look at in between the units. Okay. We will be breaking it up, I guess, to point out a little bit that the ADUs in the back will not have garages. They're just going to be first and second story, whereas the front units living are second and third, so we will have some height, some difference there. That'll help a little bit.
Okay. Who would like to say something next? Do we have any other commissioners who have comments or questions? It looks like Kimberly White, you have a hand up.
I figure out how to toggle that hand. I just wanted to say I'm really excited about the project, and I do concur it is an excellent use of the space. We're going to have 28 individuals that will be housed, which is huge. I really do like the conceptual rendition, and I'm excited to see it. I think the setback is a non-issue, being, that you go right across the street. It's, not an issue. I feel like the fact that they brought it forward as opposed to later, I think this is an opportunity, that there's some collaboration. And the whole reason that the ADU legislation came through the state was because we had a housing shortage. So I'm happy to see that they are able to add these 3 units to make a total of 8.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? I think Kristen, have you got any questions?
I haven't commented yet. Yeah. Hey, Sarah. Just wanted to comment on, I think that this is an excellent project, and it's going to be a great opportunity for the community to provide more housing. And, considering that previous tenant at that, in that parcel, unfortunately their home burned down. However, this is a great, change in this part of the community. Great opportunity. I like the ideas of cantilevering the second, third floors, essentially to give it depth and give it a better presentation. I also like the idea as well as using the low impact development standards for the courtyard area and using pavers and so forth. And I'm sure you'll include other LID requirements in your design. So I'm definitely looking forward to it and seeing it come down the pike. Thanks.
Hey. Yeah, I had a few questions myself, actually. And I really appreciate that you clarified that that elevation was on the previous design, because I was also kind of confused. But yeah, that's a terrific site. And it's great to get more housing into our downtown. I'm wondering about whether you see these as rental units or whether you were hoping somehow to subdivide here, because my understanding is that typically when you talk about ADUs, that those are per parcel or designations, but that they wouldn't necessarily apply in a medium density rental situation. So maybe you could just clarify, are these right now in your mind rental units, or would this be a subdivision coming up soon?
I think they're
Yeah,
proposing.
I'm not sure if Kyle wanted to speak to that.
Oh, sorry, sir. Didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah, we have no plans to subdivide this in any kind of sort. So these do plan at this point to be rental units, correct?
Okay. Yeah, so that in that case, I, I'm a little bit confused about how all those ADU requirements actually apply on a single parcel, because this doesn't quite fit with what I have. On the other hand, getting additional housing there certainly does fit very well with all of our policies. But I'm also wondering if you can explain, I saw that courtyard as a courtyard initially, and then when I realized that that elevation had the garage access from the other side, I realized that actually the courtyard was going to function as an alley, a driveway, a joint driveway for all of those garages, which made me wonder why you've got that alley driveway in the middle instead of having the units back to back and the driveway on the southern edge of the property.
Did you want me to speak to that now?
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
wondering why you had, basically vehicle access right in the middle of the property instead of on the edge.
Yeah, so originally, like I said, the original design had the garages like you'll see in the elevations. They are set up more like kind of single family, so each garage had its own driveway off the front, off the north side. Public Works or engineering came back and said that they wanted to limit driveways access to like one or two. So that forced us to either take the driveway in the middle or on the south property line. We looked at a series of site plan layouts, and really it just made the most sense to put that in the middle for open space to keep the units separate. When we put it on the back side of the alley, or I'm sorry, the back side of the property, it really just pushed the units together. So we had just like this one huge apartment complex without separation. But with the driveway in between, it gives us space, like physical space between the units, as well as solar for all of the units.
Okay, and what you're envisioning now would have the higher units on the north and the lower units on the south? Is that what you were thinking?
Yes. Yeah, the south is 2-story, and then the north are 3-story, with the living space being the top 2 stories. So, and then the front units there, the 3 stories, will have a large rooftop deck south facing as well.
Okay, and then you did that because Public Works wants to retain as much street parking in the neighborhood as possible, and that's why they didn't want that whole north side as driveways?
I don't know if it was for on-street. Okay.
Yeah, so there's kind of 2 drivers that were motivating that design change. One was that the city standards don't allow driveways to be close together like that, lined up. So, Sarah's right, from a standpoint of, having more of a single family look, having the buildings right up on the sidewalk or even set back with driveways, that has more of a single family look, but then it would have had so many access points. And they could have done away with some entrances, some egress to those, and not provided driveways and parking for all of the units. But I think that was one of their project objectives. The other thing is that, with our design, what we heard historically from the Historic and Design Review Commission and from the Planning Commission is sort of embedded in our design ethos, the staff level, if you will, is to try and not put the parking in the front, try and put the living spaces in the front. And so we were trying to replicate that. And I think to your point, having the driveway on the south side would have effectively done the same thing there. But to Sarah's point, having that separation provides a little more solar access. So I think that's ultimately where the project ended up like that.
Okay.
I did want to address too the issue about accessory dwelling units. I know it seems a little odd from our typical understanding of what an accessory dwelling unit is, but the state law actually provides for accessory dwelling units in multifamily as well as single family. And so the state law is actually a little bit more generous with accessory dwelling units on multifamily. When this project comes back, we'll actually cite code section that authorizes that additional dwelling unit, so that the Planning Commission has that at their disposal. But for right now, I'll just say that the ADU law actually provides us as a principally permitted pathway, and so we're just trying to get a better design out of it by looking at it comprehensively.
Okay, weren't we going to be modifying the city of Arcata's regs to reflect that state law somewhere in this process? And when is that going to happen?
I don't have a timeline for that yet. The HCOG, the Humboldt County Association of Governments, is applying for funds for the state. They're called REAP funds. And one of the projects that we're hoping that REAP funding will provide for is to update our ADU code. But regardless of whether our code is updated or not, it still has to comport with the state law. And so we would import these same provisions into our local code at that time.
Okay, but in terms of the timing of this project, especially coming before the Planning Commission, we're going to be in a kind of legal limbo at that point if we haven't got that new code.
No, we defer to the state law. We in the absence of a local code that implements state law, we implement state law. So we're not in any legal
Okay.
limbo, and we're not going to be in the process of adopting a new ADU code while this project is before you. I believe that they're anxious to get to hearing on this. We've spent probably almost a year talking with Sarah and Kyle about this project, trying to figure out how to make it work because of the overlap of the various different codes. And I have to say, I mean, it's been one of the this little project has probably been one of the hardest planning challenges for our team to be able to, sort through the various, options and figure out what the pathway is. I mean, and I think we're finally there. We just wanted to make sure that the planning commission felt comfortable with the approach that we were proposing as well. And I think I'm largely hearing you are. I also wanted to mention that there's a couple of folks in the public that wanted to speak on the project.
Okay, could I ask one last question? In that courtyard area, which I guess you call it a courtyard, I would call it an alley. Is that going to be open to the public, or is that going to be gated?
It won't be gated, but it's private property, so the public shouldn't be using it.
Well, but
just residents, I guess.
Okay, but if someone is coming to one of those rear residents with the front door and that open porch on that courtyard, they're going to be able to walk in without a gate, correct?
Oh, yeah. So the front doors will be on the street-facing side. The garages will be accessed off of the back, but the front doors will remain for the front units on the street-facing, and then yes, the ADUs.
The rear units.
Yeah, so those would have a sidewalk along the front of them that guests would need to use, yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah. Sounds like we have a bunch of other questions from the public.
Okay. Give me a moment to manage the Zoom. Colin, you're in the meeting.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So this is Colin Fisk with the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities. And I want to say that, I agree with the comments that have been made that we really do want extra housing units and density in this area. And I appreciate, that staff has worked with the applicant to try and make that happen. I also wanted to say that this is also an area where we really want to focus on pedestrian-oriented design, and so that's another important reason to minimize the number of curb cuts. As you all know, parking isn't a concern of mine, but pedestrian design is, and so I appreciate that the city has put that forward and minimized the number of curb cuts that will create conflicts with pedestrians on the sidewalk. And I want to say, I know it would create all sorts of additional conflicts, but we would even support, looking at not providing the off-street parking and adding more units. So if there's any possibility of that, I would encourage you to look into it. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin.
Okay. We've got another public person.
Hi, is that me? Hi.
Yep, you're up, Karina.
Cool. So, my property backs onto that one, and I'm thrilled that we're putting in some units in there. We need it. I really, really hope that it doesn't look like the other three that we've put in the last few years. The question is, we have a large redwood tree that's kind of impinging on that a bit. And I'm wondering, I know it's early, but I'm wondering if they have plans to deal with it, or will they let it be? Beautiful tree.
See, I can try and see. Here we go. I'm going to allow Kyle and Sarah back in to see if they can address that, if that's okay by Vice Chair, Mayor.
Yep.
Yes, hello. Yeah, we have no plans to touch or remove the redwood tree. We made sure to have a good 16-foot setback off of that property line to allow for that extra space. And I wasn't sure if it was Karina, you that I spoke with, but we definitely have no plans to touch that tree at this point because I feel like it is a beautiful piece of the property, and we want to keep that there and allow the space for that in our development process.
Thank you.
Okay, it's nice that this can be a forum for neighbors to actually speak to each other. That's great. And is there anyone else who wants to ask anything, explain anything, make some comments? And as far as what you want from the Planning Commission today, both the applicants and staff, what would you like to hear from us?
I think we're good. There's no formal action that can be taken at this point. I think we've gotten, feedback on the process, and the applicant's gotten feedback on design. This will be coming back as a, formal hearing, noticed hearing, when the designs are complete, so that they can, address your comments, and you'll be able to see those again before approval.
Okay, great. Anything else before we close this business item from any of our participants? Nope. Okay, we'll look forward to seeing this proposal again and to see how it fleshes out a little bit. That's it for our business items this evening. Our next agenda item is correspondence and communications. Do we have any correspondence that staff has received? And is there anything that you'd like to tell us, or anything that the commission would like to say to staff or to the public?
Not sure if Joe has any correspondence, but I will reach out and let the Planning Commission and the community know that our next Planning Commission meeting, which will be the August 10th, we'll start in-person meetings again at that point. And so we'll be having those in the council chambers, and we've got facilities that would allow the public to continue to phone in and or Zoom in. And we'll provide information on how to do that on the agenda for that meeting. So we'll be meeting back in the council chambers in real life again soon.
Okay, that's good news. I think it's good news. And is there anything from any of the commission members that we'd like to ask or say to staff or the public at this point?
Commissioner Barstow has something.
Okay.
I recently noticed that a solar farm has appeared at the Lazy J mobile home park. And I was just curious, is this, I don't think we ever saw that. And is that because of the state code that removes solar installations from discretionary approval?
Good
question. This particular one, because it was on a mobile home park, HCD retains the permit jurisdiction for building permits over that. So we had absolutely no jurisdiction on that project at all. It's unclear to me whether or not the solar farms would fall under the solar access laws. I don't believe they would, but I will research that and get back to the Planning Commission on that.
Interesting. Anything else from the commission or from staff? I do have a question myself about going back to in-person meetings. At that point, will commissioners be only in person, or would commissioners be able to Zoom into a meeting during the initial sort of interim period?
I did start to research that today based on your inquiry earlier to me by email. And I know that right now the Brown Act has special provisions due to executive order that at least through October, committees and commissions are allowed to meet electronically as we are now. I believe that the concept for for going back to in-person meetings right now is that we would have them fully in person. But I also know that there are provisions for having remote access to in-person meetings, and I'll look into that in a little more detail. It could be problematic because you do have to post notice at the location where you're at and allow the public to enter if they wish to provide public comment. And there's some other provisions, so we can get into that. But it looks like the current direction the city is attempting to take is to go fully open meeting or fully in-person meetings.
Okay, thanks. Anything else? Okay. In that case, we have gone through our agenda for this evening's meeting, and we are adjourned.
All right, thank you.